Hello and welcome to Forum 360. I'm your host, Bill Stephen Souse, a program with a global outlook and a local view. Forum 360 right here in Northeast Ohio on PBS Western Reserve and Rubber City Radio, and also our host community, Hudson Community Television. And we just thank all of our staff helping to get this program started today. We have today, our global outlook is healthcare professional, physicians, surgeons. There are many around the world that go through this specialized training to be a doctor, physician, healthcare professional. Today, the local view is we have Dr. Gregory Hill, a DO, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine, and an Akron native, and it's great to have Dr. Hill with us. Doc, you have written a book called Through It All, How Sacrifice and Service Helped in Achieving Your Dream of Becoming a Surgeon. And we are premiering this book this year, and we hope to hear more about it. So thank you for being with Forum 360 today, Doctor.
Bill, thank you very much for the opportunity to share some information regarding my book. And thank you to Meg as well for hosting this event.
Our
and
producer,
allowing me
Meg,
to present some information. Yes.
And I appreciate the folks down at Western Reserve Hospital. It's a physician-owned hospital and partnering with University Hospital. But you've been involved with it for many years, and we'll get back to that in a little bit. But I want to talk about your background, your family, how things started in your life to get this dream going to becoming a surgeon. What are some of the highlights in the early days?
Well, I think as the book sort of outlines, I grew up here in the Akron community, in West Akron, over near the Akron Zoo. And I stayed actually, I lived in public housing, commonly known as the projects, but I didn't know any different.
Right.
That's where I lived. And this was in the 60s, during some turbulent times. And then later on, we moved to West Akron up near what was called then West Hill. And I went to elementary school at Schumacher and Simon Perkins Junior High School, and then finished my high school education at John R. Buchtel High School on Copley Road in Akron.
So that was your start. But you want to say that you were a big brother. And that was one of the most interesting parts of the book, is your involvement with your siblings and your parents, your stepdad. Tell us a little bit about how your parents, got involved in your life, started you out on the right road.
Well, that's a great question too, and certainly encourage everyone to get the book to read a little bit more about the author. But when I got to the point that I realized who I was, and I was a young boy, like most kids growing up, and was playful and playing in West Akron near the zoo. And my mom was divorced, and at the time she had was me and my sister.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the oldest of four kids ultimately. And ultimately, my mom married John Dunkley, my stepdad, and became my dad. I never referred to him as my stepdad, but he was my dad. He was there as a provider and a teacher and a mentor to some degree. And that's when we moved to West Akron. And so we bought a house, and this was all new stuff for me at the time. And
you started
with
with family involvement. I remember you said in your book about how the Akron Beacon Journal, when you guys were young, and your dad said, "We've got a job now. We're going to be delivering the Beacon," one of the night newspapers, one of the biggest newspapers, and some of the fun things you remember doing with your folks like that, with your brothers and your dad.
Right. Those were incredible times, and they were fun times and I didn't realize how pivotal and how fun it was until I look back on those times. And we would obviously get up and deliver the papers, but to do that, you need to be awake by 3 o'clock in the morning, and you get up and you fold the papers together and you get in the car. And of course, my dad, like most dads, would just sit in the car and ride along and drive along, and we would,
Do
throw
the
the
walking,
papers,
yeah, and they're walking around.
walk through the neighborhood and deliver the papers. But the best part after that was the bonding that occurred after that, where we went to either Krispy Kreme, which is still
Donuts,
present over
still on
on
the west side, Maple
Maple,
Street. Yeah,
Maple, right. And as you know, when you go to Krispy Kreme's and you're standing in line waiting for your batch of donuts, they would often offer you, would you like a fresh donut
right,
coming off the rack? And of
right.
course, we would say yes. And we would buy, probably eat a half a dozen, then take a half a dozen home for the rest of the family. But it was just a wonderful time to be with my brothers and my dad at the time. You don't recognize the
Right.
importance of that at the time. But it was great, great, great growing up there
So,
doing that.
that gave you that work ethic, supporting the family, and getting your family involved, because that work ethic obviously started to materialize as you decided maybe you had that where you talk in your book about a little bit of uncertainty what you wanted to do, but eventually you decided I'd like to pursue something in healthcare. And tell us about that early involvement. And I remember talking to you off the air about Dr. Aubrey Willisey, who was one of the first African American doctors you met when you were in high school and doing physicals for sports activities and so forth. So I mean, seeing these people that could inspire you, some of the ways that you decided, let's go to the medical field, maybe get started there.
Right. And I do remember Dr. Willesee because one, he was a rare breed, if you will. He was an African American physician, did primary care,
Hmm.
and I played sports growing up. Played baseball, played basketball, organized baseball and basketball, baseball, basketball, and football. And you had to have a physical before you could play. And so we would go there and you
Yeah.
go through the fundamental basic physical, stretching and checking for a hernia and things like that, but never really had a conversation with him about the healthcare piece,
Right.
and he say, "Oh, good luck with what you're doing in school." But more importantly, when I got to Bookdo, and as I talk about in the book, when I got to Bookdo, I was a good student. I probably could have been better, but I had opportunity to participate in a vocational medical careers program,
Hmm.
and so. The purpose of that program was to introduce health professions to students who maybe wouldn't decide or hadn't decided about whether they would go to college or not.
Hmm.
And and so if you didn't go to college, you would have a skill such that you'd be prepared to enter the workforce.
Right.
And I thought that that might be a wonderful opportunity. And so I signed up for the program. My grades were good enough to do it. And so we had an opportunity to visit Akron City Hospital. There were students in surgical technology, medical assisting, nursing, respiratory therapy, physical therapy. So I chose surgical technology.
Hmm.
And we went to visit Akron City Hospital at the time, and there was a surgeon there performing an operation. His name was Dr. Wally Roof. And so he welcomed us into the operating room, and they told us, don't touch anything. Everything is sterile.
Hmm.
And I'm telling you, Bill, it was during that visit I had an epiphany. Excuse me.
Hmm.
I had an epiphany, and by that I mean I had an awakening that I determined at that moment, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I
Very
want to
good.
be a surgeon. I think I would love that. I had no idea what the operation was, but I was very inquisitive about it. And there was something that struck me in my head and in my heart that, hey, you can do this.
Right.
And it was at that point in time, in around 1972 or 73, that I decided that I wanted to become a doctor. Little did I know how challenging it would be um, later on,
Right.
trying to navigate the terrain to becoming a surgeon.
Right.
But one important thing I would also tell you is that I had a counselor in high school who was supposed to be supportive.
Hmm.
And I don't think he was really as supportive as he may have been, might have been. And he says, well, you have to take the ACT. I questioned him about the purpose of the ACT. And he said, well, you have to make a determination about whether you go to college or not. I said, oh, okay. Well, how do you prepare for the ACT?
Hmm.
He said, well, you can't study for it. You got to just take the test. So I went and took the test. I didn't do well, of course, because I didn't prepare for it.
Right.
And he said, well, we use this as an index of your ability to get through school. And so I felt like it was a disservice at the time.
Right.
And, here I was in a public high school, and I don't have the confidence of my counselor. And
Right.
so that was another motivating factor for me to show him and show the world, well, you can't tell me what I'm going to do or not do, that I can make a decision to do what I want to do with my career.
Right.
And I became even more motivated at that point in time to become a doctor.
And then you eventually, actually, you went to University of Akron, you went to Baldwin Wallace, a little bit at Cleveland Cuyahoga Community College,
Yes, sir.
and you were able to put all these organizations and institutions together to really provide you with the training you needed to get started. And then you had a couple to get you to understand what type of surgery. Tell us about Dr. Forshu, one of your early mentors in Akron.
Absolutely. Dr. Forshu was one of two prominent hand surgeons in the 70s who he had done his orthopedic residency in at Summa, or
Right.
Summa, not Summa,
Akron
Summa now,
City
but
then?
then it was Akron City.
Right.
But he had done his residency there, and then he had gone away to do a fellowship in Iowa with a renowned surgeon, Adrian Flatt. So after his fellowship, he came back to Akron. And so I was working for the hospital at the time, and I would oftentimes scrub with him or assist him in surgery, complex surgeries. And my role at the time was passing instruments. And so I would help him during those procedures, and I found it intriguing. He was a gentleman, he was a scholar, very encouraging, and I sort of liked him a lot. But he followed my career, and once I finished graduating from Baldwin Wallace, uh, strangely enough, I received a phone call from him, and he says, "Greg, this is Frank Forshu calling. I want to say congratulations on your desire to go to medical school." He said, "But I wanted to talk to you about something here briefly." He said, "I hear you're going to take a year off of school. What are you going to do?" I says, "I don't know. I think I need to get a job, make some money, and catch my breath a little bit."
Right.
And he said, "I would like to offer you an opportunity to work with our team." And I felt so honored and so humbled that he would choose me
Right.
to be a part of his team. And so then I went from working at City Hospital to working for Dr. Forshu as a private assistant, as a
Nice.
surgical assistant in the
Very good.
office and in the operating room. And it was incredible because I worked side by side with him. When he got called in the middle of the night for a traumatic hand injury, they would call me. And I would be there to assist, passing instruments, working, doing microsurgery, assisting under the microscope. Um,
Right.
and it was a wonderful opportunity as I prepared then to apply to Ohio University. And
For
I
the
applied,
medical school, yeah. For the
yeah, I
osteopathic
applied to
medical
Ohio
school.
University then.
Yeah, very good.
And, you know, in September of 19, well, around September or so, I was accepted, received the acceptance letter,
Right.
and then I was accepted at Ohio University.
So for the,
And
I think in your book you talk about you had been in the class of 1986, the graduate class,
yes, yes,
and
sir.
at Ohio University, and that is the College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Yes,
And
sir.
out of 100 students, there were 4 African American. You were one of them.
That is correct.
And
So
it's an
there were
interesting.
four, yes, sir, four um, African American students there, and as we look at things today in society, there's this emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there was not in the '80s probably was not that emphasis on DEI as it's called
Right. Yeah.
nowadays,
Right.
and so there were four, like you mentioned, four African American students. And interesting, at the end of the first quarter, if you will, we were on quarters, not semesters, but at the end of the first quarter, there were two left.
Okay.
One person had some health issues, and he had to resign from school, and the other person, we call it recycling.
Gotcha.
So they had some academic challenges and came back with the following class and graduated fine.
I want to just say that we are talking to Dr. Gregory Hill from Western Reserve Hospital and Unity Health physicians, and we're talking about his new book, Through It All: How Sacrifice and Service Helped in Achieving his dream of becoming a surgeon. It's available. Dr. Hill's memoir and book is available on Amazon, and I'm so glad that this book came out because it's inspiring to me, and I can appreciate the rigors and the discipline that you'd have to go through to become a surgeon. And we're going to talk about also your involvement in the military. If you look at the cover, you'll see Dr. Hill with the U.S. Army for part of his scrubs. And tell us about I think in your book you talk about 1983. You explored getting involved in the U.S. Army Reserve Medical Corps. Tell us about how that impacted your life, also, Doctor.
Yes, sir. So I came from a family of veterans, actually. We had a blended family. You had a stepbrother who was 1 year ahead of me at Bocto. He had joined the Air Force. And was stationed in California. And then growing up, I had a decorated Vietnam vet as someone that I idolized as a youngster.
Wow.
And he had a polished shoes and the Class A uniform. And so I'd always thought in my mind that I would be honored to serve. But in medical school, many students go and they have financial challenges like I did as well. And as an opportunity to supplement my income and to gain military and medical experience at the same time, get academic credit, military credit, I decided to join the United States Army Reserves and the Ohio Army National Guard. And this was in March of 1983.
Wow.
And so during peacetime, you're still trained. And so we would do physicals, we would go to Greeley, Michigan, we would do range fire, medical exams, and all of these kinds of things. Well, this little thing called 9/11 occurred.
Right, 9/11, 2001, and you were already
There you go.
well
There
in
you
your
go.
career, well involved in your career, and
I was well involved in my career at the time, and then 9/11 occurred, and so I was very, very concerned that I would be mobilized or, committed to
combat
active duty.
combat
Right,
action.
had
Yeah,
to go to active duty.
right.
And we didn't know what that looked like, but our commander told us that yes, at some point in time you will have to go, but we don't know when. And so I was a newlywed at the time. I got married. My wife Judy and I married 1 month to the day of 9/11.
Wow.
And so she was concerned by it, and my mother was concerned by it. And uh, as you will read in the book, that day came. I was in
Right.
surgery on a Thursday afternoon when I received a phone call from my commander
Exactly.
telling me about uh, it was my time to serve.
And you had this you knew the amount of time you would have to be for your first deployment too, going to Iraq for Iraqi freedom and so forth. So tell us about that initial knowledge that you're going overseas, and there was some preparation, correct, Doctor, that you really had to work on.
Yes, yes. There's an extreme amount of preparation that is required when you are a reservist and you are going from the civilian side to an active duty conflict. First of all, you have to do what's called pre-mobilization checklist. There's a checklist that you have to go through, if you will, that includes making sure that your financial things are covered, make sure your family things are covered,
Right.
medical things are covered, and your employment on the civilian side, making sure that your life insurance and your disability insurance is covered.
Right.
One of the more important things is that you have to go through a rigorous physical exam to make sure you are suitable and fit for combat. And that is a generic term, but to be fit for combat means to carry 20 or 30 extra pounds, to
Right.
carry your weapon, to jump, to climb, to do anything like that. So there's a lot of things that are required. One of the important things that I will comment on is that bothered my wife significantly is that I had to make sure that my life insurance was in order.
Right.
And the military makes a big deal of that. And
Right.
my wife said, the military is preparing you as though you're not going to come back.
Hmm.
And I said, that is a requirement. That is exactly what they do.
Right. It's the knowing
In the
that you
event
have to
that you are
serve.
injured,
Hmm.
right. In the event that you're injured or you're killed, um,
Right.
you have to be able to identify, and the process has to be established so that your families are taken care of.
Now, the first deployment, you were in a zone where you had a medical a group. I guess you could call it a field hospital or military hospital. But on the second deployment, you went out and you went further north to the Fallujah area. That is an amazing part of the book where you got a little bit more involved. And when your commanding officers, the other surgeons would say, Greg, you're not just going to be a hand surgeon. You're going to have to, be an orthopedics
Be a trauma surgeon.
generalist, trauma surgeon.
Right.
So
Right.
The military training is amazing, and that's another reason why somebody should read the book through it all, and all is about your military service. But one of the things that inspired you to do things back at the hospital was to teach, get involved with residency. What are some of the activities you did to try to prepare young residents to be a part of Western Reserve Hospital, and what you've done to inspire them? I mean, some of the work you've done there, just to, that you've been a mentor for others, just like Dr. Forsey was a mentor to you,
Right. We always talk about carrying it forward, and I think that I'm really at heart a teacher, because someone at some point in time reached back and picked me up and poured some blessings and some knowledge into my brain and my heart, and
Right.
encouraged me to do the same for other people. I think at the core of who I am, I'm a servant leader, and I think as a servant, it's about giving and helping in whatever capacity you can. And so, from an educator standpoint, um, again, someone taught me how to be a doctor, how to scrub in surgery, how to sew, and
Right.
how to reduce fractures, how to do surgeries. And I think it's only befitting that I should carry on that in terms of the current generation.
Right,
Um,
right.
and I've been in practice 32 years, and of those 32, I've been in a program director or an educator and mentor approximately 25 to 30 of those
Right.
years.
I know at the hospital, you and Dr. Rob Kent, osteopathic physicians, are leading and providing a lot of leadership to young doctors. You have in your book a theme that seems to go through the book, through it all, 6 key principles that you think encourage people: faith, perseverance, relationships, service, preparation, and discipline. And I think you use it seems when I read the book, you use those when you're teaching young people, whether they're really young, teenagers, or you even say that sometimes residents remind you of teenagers. I like that because, because they really don't know where they're going yet. And you provide that. They've got their medical degree, they're doctors, but you have to show them the practical side of medicine. And I think that those key points are so important, right?
Absolutely. As I wrote the book, I sort of tried to figure out um, what values were most important to me, and first and foremost, I think as a servant leader, my faith was important. When as I talk about in the book, there are multiple times in my life where my faith has been an important, multiple times in my military training, being in combat, trusting situations, right? Trusting the unknown,
Very
trusting
good.
being in battle and things like that. Uh, to go to medical school is a long, arduous journey, and it requires perseverance. If you think that you can do it quickly, there's a lot
Right.
more to learn, right?
Time
And
is,
so,
yeah, you got time and discipline and
yeah,
all
time,
these
time and
things, and
discipline, right?
faith
Those
and perseverance, and your church, you're active now still at church, at the Arlington Church of God. And I just want to say, that if people really want to get this information, go to the Amazon and try to buy Through It All. And we got about a minute left, Doctor. You also have a website which people can go to also, correct, Dr. Hill? It's Dr.
Yes,
Hill hyphen inspiringandeducating.com. We got a minute left, Doc. Is there anything you want to close with for the audience of Forum 360?
Yes, I think I've been blessed to write this book through it all, how sacrifice and service helped in achieving my dream of becoming a surgeon. I think it's an inspiring read. It is my memoir. I personally wrote the book, obviously, but it is for those individuals who face challenges about life, whether it's educational, whether it's social, whether it's financial, and understand that the journey can be arduous, it can be long, and it requires perseverance, it requires discipline, it requires mentorship, it requires mentoring and working with other individuals that can pour blessings into your life.
I
Those of
appreciate
us who
that.
have been
Yeah.
successful, we have to rely on others to help us become successful.
Dr. Gregory Hill, I want to thank you for being a part of Forum 360, and your Through It All book is a wonderful book. I will hope that many people can find that and get involved in reading it. Thank you, Dr. Hill.
Bill, thank you very, very much, and thank you for Forum 360 allowing me to share my story. Thank you.
Anytime, Doctor.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.